Let's state the obvious. I'm a white Anglo-Saxon male, but I don't feel that way inside. And when I say that, what I mean is my interests extend to history from many cultures and the art of many cultures and many periods. And I feel a sense of ownership. In other words, I feel that it is my past as well. Yes, I'm, white, European, Caucasian, but does that mean I can't appreciate and enjoy the art of the cultures of China or the New World, the Americas, or Egypt or Africa, and feel a sense of kinship with these peoples from different times and places? Unfortunately, however, in this day and age, there is a move almost to balkanize the world. And when I say that, what I mean is to separate everything into its little boxes. And the art of Greece only in Greece, the art of the Romans or Italy only in Italy, the art of Egypt only in Egypt, and it goes on and on. There are people out there who would virtually strip the encyclopedic museums that we've built over the past century and return the art to all these nations. And what would that leave us? Unfortunately, not very much that would be of great interest, at least to me, and I think to many people. And it would, I think, deprive us of so much. So we all know that I'm a dealer of ancient art, antiquities, but what that really means is that I find objects and purchase them in the hopes that I can sell them for profit later on, and often I have to wait a long time. One of the ways to deal with that is to only buy what you love. Then it really doesn't sort of matter because I feel enriched by having them in my life. And I think that that's something that people who haven't collected art don't really understand, is what living with art brings to one as an individual. It's very enriching and spiritually uplifting. Then, of course, going to museums is sort of like a Coney Island of the soul. Being able to go to the Metropolitan Museum and see the art of ancient Egypt or the ancient Americas or Greece and Rome and China in one trip is amazing. But we are living in a time in which the ancient art market has been vilified, and antiquity collectors are being portrayed as feeding, the illicit market in antiquities and therefore funding terrorists is the newest angle, or causing the depredation of archaeological sites. And it's creating a real problem for the field. I mean, it's creating a class of objects which are perfectly legitimate. When I say legitimate, what that means is they've been out of the country of origin for a long time. They're not the product of recent looting or illicit trade, but they simply have lost their documentation. And that happens too easily. And it happens partly because the sellers don't want anyone to know they're selling. So there are these objects that can't be given to museums, can't be sold at auction, but there is nothing wrong with them. And so it's become very extreme. The worst thing, we are not being honest about what's really happening in the world. And the reality is, our cultural heritage, our human, collective cultural heritage, and by that I mean all of us have a stake in the art of the cultures of the world, is at risk. One of the most egregious examples of the sort of threat that cultural objects are under was the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas in March of 2001, in which the Taliban announced they were going to do this and then blew up the statues that had dominated this valley. The world did nothing. They announced they were going to do this. They told us when they were going to do it. It was in a geographically isolated place. we did nothing. Not until, 2001 and the Twin Towers fell. Then all of a sudden we're at war with the Taliban. Well, the Taliban proved how terrible they were early on. The Iraqi invasion, the museum in Baghdad was sacked. 7,000 pieces were taken. I think a number have been returned, but who knows, right? Then when ISIS took over Mosul.
This morning, ISIS claims to have destroyed priceless pieces of history. A video posted yesterday shows people taking power tools and sledgehammers to irreplaceable statues and artifacts in Iraq. One piece may date back all the way to 700 BC.
And then, not content with that, they went to the site of Nimrud, which was the capital of the Assyrian Empire in the 8th century BC, and blew it up with high-powered explosives to not only destroy what was above the ground, but cause a shockwave through the ground to destroy what was underground. None of these countries are secure. They can't protect their own territory, their citizens, or their antiquities. In the riots in Cairo, they did break into the Cairo Museum. Now, we don't hear much about it, but there were some things that were damaged. And I'm not even sure that some things weren't taken. That's a big issue, and the reason it's an issue for us is we're being told by our State Department and Homeland Security, who doesn't seem to have enough to do, is out persecuting antiquity dealers, accusing them of funding ISIS by trading in illicit antiquities that ISIS is smuggling out. I don't think ISIS is smuggling that much out. I went to a symposium on this, and the men from Homeland Security were there showing their little video. The objects were a dreck. They were worth $50, $100 on eBay, if that. They were awful, or they were obvious fakes. So it was like, this is not funding much of anything. And there's a sort of complete lack of consistency of thought. So let's see, on one hand, Iran is enemy number one.
The Iranian regime is the leading state sponsor of terror.
And yet, an English dealer was exhibiting in New York a crumb from Persepolis. We're talking about a relief no larger than this. It had been exhibited in the Montreal Museum of Art for decades, and no doubt left Iran, probably smuggled out in the 30s. We confiscated it from Rupert Wace and then returned it to Iran. Now, how does this make sense? And why would we cooperate with enemy number one, A? And if that antiquity, which had been known publicly and publicly exhibited for 50 years, is not legitimate, then what is? And basically, when you say that, you're saying that nothing is. Where does that leave us? In a world that's impoverished. There's another point I'd like to make, which is the positive role of the market. The fact that things can be bought and sold gives them a monetary value. Now, granted, antiquities are, in the art world, of no great value. I mean, we're not talking about the sort of prices that a Leonardo da Vinci would bring, or, a modern contemporary work by someone like Jeff Koons. But there's still, it's money. The fact it has value means there's an incentive to preserve them and protect them. And I think that's an underappreciated benefit of having a market in these objects. If you eliminated a market in antiquities successfully, no one would want to save them. They're a tremendous inconvenience. They would just destroy it if it had no value. And in an ideal world, the state would allow people to benefit from chance discoveries, because most antiquities are found by chance. The goal should be the preservation of archaeological sites, the preservation of the objects that are found. I think it's important for art to travel and for there to be encyclopedic collections across the world, because it helps preserve what I regard as our common cultural heritage.